Welcome back, guys, and do I have another video for you? And it's another regional location within Victoria, and it is Shepparton. Now, for those of you who don't know or who are new to my channel, we have over 3,000 subscribers, and a lot of you will not know that I actually reviewed Shepparton about 1 year ago. And back then, it was a much cooler market, but Shepparton is another regional location within Victoria that can offer you close to 5%, and in some cases above a 5% yield. It is a great opportunity for those of you who are looking to make sort of quick equity within a regional location. And I'm going to go through all things, the pros, the cons, the type of properties, the public housing pockets, everything that you guys need to know about Shepparton is in this video. So smash that like button, subscribe, and let's get straight into it. Now, the first thing I always like to do is go through the actual data itself and tell you what is looking good on it. And when we look at Shepparton, you can see the median buy price is around $500,000. That 500 mark is getting pretty difficult to buy in Shepparton, but it is still possible for the right property. And when you start to scroll down, you can see that the prices have started moving. The quarter change is around 1% and the year change is around 2%. I do find that to be a little bit higher at this point in time. Rents have risen only about 2% over the past year, which isn't great, but I would say just acceptable. It's nothing to celebrate about, to be honest. Yields have started dropping because the prices have started to increase once again. And when we start to scroll down, there's a couple of good factors we like to see. We can see the renter to owner occupier ratio is around 37%, which isn't too bad, but not too great as well. It would be another trade-off. And when we look at the affordability, we can see that it's sitting at about 30 years. So for a regional location, Shepparton is extremely affordable for local residents, which we like to see. And generally means that owner occupiers can sustain the house prices currently in the market. But what's more interesting to see is the actual supply and demand metrics of Shepparton. We can see stock levels have absolutely started plummeting since last year, about 2024, and it's still continuing to get lower and lower. And also the days on market or the demand levels have started to increase. Now, this last bar I believe is an anomaly at 95 days because from what I hear on the ground, Shepparton has really picked up. It is a moving market and it's fast moving as well. So the supply and demand metrics are very strong. And you don't have to only look at H-tag for it. You can also look at SQM research, which shows you the days on market and the actual total property listings, which is absolutely plummeting over the past couple of months. So we know that supply is decreasing month on month, which will lead to capital growth in the future. Now, if you do have a keen eye, you will see a couple of things straight away. It's the vacancy rate and the building approvals. It's a little bit on the higher side, and I will touch on to the new estates and the building approvals that are coming into Shepparton. And with the vacancy rate being at 2.37%, once again, it's not great, but it's not too bad. It's something you may be willing to trade off if you want to consider this location for investment. And we can see that vacancy rates are rising, and I do expect it to rise even more slightly because there are more investors in the market and there is more property transactions settling. We are like to see that vacancy start to rise a little bit more as well. So that is a call out that you need to acknowledge when investing into Shepparton. But the fundamentals of it from a capital growth standpoint is that it's going to grow in value. In fact, over the past quarter change, we're seeing about 6% growth, and over the past 12 months, we've seen about 26% growth. Now, I do believe those numbers are a little bit inflated because I don't think prices have grown that much over the past 12 months, but it has started to grow once again. And for those investors who are looking for a location for quick equity, for a location that is actively growing in capital, this is one to consider. But that's the underlying demand and supply metrics, right? But what else does Shepparton have going for it? Well, it's really important to look at its economy, and majority of its economy is tied to healthcare and social assistance. And when you start to break it down, it is a pretty economically diverse location, invested into healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing, construction, education, training, and more. And all you have to do is just look at the map of Shepparton and you look at the heart of it. You can see a university campus there. You can see Goulburn Valley Health there as well. So it has two of the most critical industries from healthcare and education and training, which is really good to see for a regional location. It is not a mining town. It is a location with 70,000 odd people living in this location with investments, with a decent economy, and with a stable population. So from the economy side and from the supply and demand metrics, we've got a tick and tick on this location. But there's more things to break down about Shepparton, so make sure you stay till to the end of the video to fully understand what you're investing into. And if you need any help choosing the right location to buy in, whether it's Shepparton, whether it's Queensland, whether it's WA, you need to be part of the private community so you can get access to personalized mentorship, the suburb watchlist, and access to over 300 other investors within the community who are helping each other out. It is an absolute no-brainer if you are buying a $500,000 to $1 million asset, you don't want to make the silly mistake of not being part of a like-minded, successful investor community. We also do have a 30-day money-back guarantee, guys, so you have no risk at all. Jump in, we will help you out. Let's get back into the video. Now, there's one thing that you will notice about Shepparton that is very important to consider, and it's because it has a gigantic river, or multiple gigantic rivers, including the Goulburn River, throughout Shepparton. And what that means is that Shepparton is located in a prime flood zone. In fact, historically, it has had many floods. I believe the latest one being in 2022. And that does bring inherent risk into Shepparton. But there are also ways to mitigate that risk, and it's by avoiding the flood zones. And when you look at Vic Plan, it has the flood zones actually laid out for you. And all the pink zones that you can see on this map is where you should be investing. Not on the blue parts, not on the dark blue parts, on the pink parts. Now, yes, some investors may take the risk and buy into the very edge of these blue parts. That's up to you. That's your risk appetite. You can do what you want. So when you do invest into Shepparton, make sure you do avoid the flood zones. And you will notice the flood zones pretty quickly with the properties in Shepparton is because they will be listed for a much cheaper price. The properties outside the flood zone are much higher and have much more value than the ones closer to the rivers. So just be careful of that. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the actual new estates or the building approvals that will possibly be coming into Shepparton in the future, in the short and the long term. And that is to do with Shepparton's Southeast Precinct plan, which will bring in about new houses, around 3,000 dwellings into this location, or if not more as well into the future, around this southern corridor of Shepparton. Now, it's also noted that up north of Shepparton as well, there is parts of new housing. Now, this can have a dampening effect on house prices in the long term, but in the short term, it's very unlikely that house prices or house price growth will slow down because the market is already hot and there is already enough demand absorbing the actual supply in the area that the housing approvals will not really affect it in the short term. So even though there is inherent risk by being in a regional location with lots of vacant land and future building supply, in the short term, if you are after short-term growth, that will have less of an impact. And if you're buying under replacement cost or close to $500,000 to $550,000 within Shepparton, you are doing yourself a favor because all the new houses coming online will be around that $650 price point, which is more expensive. So you're getting a land and house when you buy at the right price. And the last one I want to talk about, or the last risk I want to talk about in Shepparton before I go into the example of a property, is public housing pockets. And Shepparton is very well known, and unlike other regional locations, Shepparton has very specific housing pockets that you want to be careful of. And one of those pockets actually come across this Westmoreland Crescent around North Cumberland Crescent. There is a significant housing pocket in this area that you do generally want to be staying away from. It's a lower socioeconomic part of Shepparton. It's not very desirable for owner-occupiers, and so it's just best to avoid this sort of pockets. Now, there's also another pocket further up in Shepparton around Olympic Avenue, around this pocket here in Glory Way, Olympic Avenue. This pocket here as well is full of public housing and social housing that you do want to be avoiding. Now, once again, it's very easy to spot them because house prices are very cheap in this area. Just avoid them, save yourself the hassle in the future, save yourself the hassle of having a poor quality tenant in there. Just buy in a good area of Shepparton and you will do well. And so that's from the public housing perspective. So I just wanted to show you an example of a property sold in Shepparton. Now, this one was sold in June, so some time has passed since then, so the market may have moved a little bit. But this one was sold 3x1 for around $530,000. Nothing too special, in a decent quality home in a good pocket of Shepparton. When you look at this one is most likely away from that flood zone, closer to the CBD of Shepparton, near the hospitals and universities, etc. And this one was sold for $535,000. So let's put that into our property calculator sheet. And roughly, when you look at other properties of similar value, this one is rented out for $520 per week. You can see this is a much nicer property on the interior, for example, another 3x1. So roughly you'll get about $500 per rent for a property like this, which will roughly yield you about 4.8%, which means you're about negative 17 grand before tax reduction, or around $1,400 per month. But the real value in Shepparton is if you can find a property like this, but a slightly cheaper price around that $500,000 mark, you can get close to a 5 or an above a 5% yield. So if yield is a pretty important component for you, Shepparton does offer offer that value in terms of cash flow. It's a much easier hold compared to like Geelong or Ballarat, where you're getting 4.5 or less than 4.5% yield. Now, are there opportunities around this price point? Yes, but they are very hard to come by now in Shepparton. You may have to do a little bit of work to them as well, but it is still possible. Some community members have purchased around that 470, 480 price point a couple months back, so you may want to double check and do your due diligence about it. But there are definitely opportunities for good brick houses in Shepparton for you guys to consider. So overall, Shepparton does provide a lot of value and promise for investors to consider. It's only about 2 or 3 hours away from Melbourne CBD, and there is also a direct train line up to Shepparton. It's about a 2-hour drive away from it. So it's not a regional location in the middle of nowhere, much like Mildura is, but Shepparton does have that good proximity. It has good brick houses for you guys to consider. You can find properties under $550,000 at the moment, close to a 5% yield. And so if it suits your criteria, your risk tolerances, then it is a location to absolutely consider. Please double check the flood zones. Please double check your insurance premiums. But Shepparton is a market on the move. Probably do want to get in now before it gets too hectic. In fact, it may already be a little bit hectic, but please guys, go double check the location, talk to some sales agents, talk to some property managers, see if it meets your criteria. And if you have any questions, jump to the private community and we will help you out. Till next time, thank you very much.